Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to begin with the University System of Maryland overview analysis. And so happy to be, it's a big deal. We have to bring them up front here. So Sarah and David, take it away.
Okay, I like to start with Exhibit 2 on page 7, which shows the change in undergraduate enrollment between fall 24 and 25. Overall enrollment grew 3.1% to over 136,000. However, when excluding Global Campus, enrollment grew 2.3% or to 81,632. 9 institutions saw their enrollment increase, with Coppin experienced the highest rate of growth of 30.7 due to an increase of 291 first-time students. At 319, Bowie had the largest decline in enrollment due to students not returning to campus. While the number of first-time students grew 4.8%, only College Park, Coppin, and Salisbury experienced an increase in these students. Exhibit 3 on page 8 shows if enrollment has returned to pre-pandemic levels using fall 29 as baseline for comparison. When including Global Campus, enrollment is above the pre-pandemic level of by over 3,600 students. However, when you exclude Global Campus, enrollment is 5.3% below the pandemic level. And this leads to concern about the financial impact this has on institutions as they need to cover lost revenues of tuition and auxiliary. Exhibit 4 on page 9, this excludes Global Campus also, and it breaks down the undergraduate enrollment by status, and which shows the decline in enrollment has been driven by students not returning back to campus, particularly during the pandemic and fall 21 and 22. It appears institutions may have turned a corner of enrollment of the continuing students as the number has increased in fall 24 and 25. The number of first-time students has steadily grown since fall 21, reaching a high of over 16,000 in 2025. A priority of USM's strategic plan is to increase the enrollment to 131,000 or more by 2025, which is exceeded by over 5,000 students. USM will continue to experience enrollment growth as long as Global Campus continues to have strong growth. However, the continuing struggles of the other institutions should not be overlooked, especially with the projected decline in high school graduates coupled with the changing demographics. We asked the Chancellor to comment on recent challenges institutions have faced in maintaining and increasing undergraduate enrollment and efforts to improve enrollment. Exhibit 5 on page 10 shows the trends in international enrollments, which have garnered much attention this past year. Overall, enrollment fell 9.5% or by 870 students this past fall due to a drop of 975 students enrolled in master's program. 679 of those students were enrolled in UMBC. So 2 things are going on here. First is a change in UMBC's admission strategy to reduce the number of international students who were enrolled in their master's program, which reached a high of over 1,700 in 23. And second is just an overall decline in enrollment of international students, especially graduate students, which may be attributed to a federal plan to place restrictions on the optional practical training program, which is a post-completion program allowing graduate students to extend their visas to gain experience in their field of study. I would note that the enrollment of undergraduate international students did grow by 5%, and that College Park and UMBC account for over 70% of the international enrollment. Moving on to retention rates, Exhibit 6 on page 12 compares the second-year retention rate of the cohort before the pandemic hit in the 24 and 25 cohorts. In general, the retention rate of the 25 cohort at 7 institutions are 2 to 5 percentage points below that of the 2020 cohort. Exhibit 7 on page 13 compares the third-year retention rate with the 2019 cohort, and overall rates have not returned to the pre-pandemic levels. We asked the Chancellor to comment on factors affecting retention rate and efforts being taken to improve the retention and student success. Turning to graduation rates on page 14, Exhibit 8 compares the 6-year graduation rate of the 2016 and 2020 cohorts. Overall, USM attained its highest average rate of 61% with the 2014 cohort, which was one of the last to graduate before the pandemic. The rate has since fallen to 56% with the 22 cohort, which can be attributed to the pandemic, in which fewer students enrolled or came back to campus. And this impact can be seen in the undergraduate degree production as shown on Exhibit 9 on page 15. After increasing to the highest number of degrees in 22, the number of the degrees awarded decreased by 4.9% in 24. However, in 25, institutions awarded the highest number of degrees since 2018. When excluding Groveville campus, the number of degrees awarded declined by 12% from 20 to 24, with Towson accounting for about 42% of this decline. Exhibit 10 on page 16 breaks down the degrees awarded by STEM, health profession, and other degrees. The goal of the USM strategic plan is to increase the number of STEM degrees by at least 10,000 and health professions by 2,500. At 10,673, the number of STEM degrees surpassed the target in 25. However, the number of health professions degrees is 259 below the target. A key factor for improving student success is financial aid. As students face various financial challenges, from how to pay to school to covering rent and food, and these stresses can affect their ability to concentrate on coursework and lead them to stopping or dropping out. Exhibit 11 on page 17 shows total expenditures on aid, and overall from 2020 to 25, spending has grown over $53 million to a total of $265.8 million in 25. Spending on need-based aid during this time has increased by $44.6 million. So students who receive aid are more likely to succeed. And Exhibit 12 on page 18 shows a 6-year graduation rate, first time in community college students who received and did not receive aid. And as you see, overall, those who receive aid graduate at higher rates. Moving on to Exhibit 13 on page 19 and research and development expenditures. From 2019 to 24, total expenditures across institutions increased by $538.4 million, with College Park and UMB accounting for $442.9 million of the increase. And expenditures total $1.8 billion in 24. However, as you know, the federal government canceled or frozen a significant number of awards to higher education institutions. In addition, federal agencies announced a decision to place a 15% cap on facilities and administrator F&A rates, which are currently blocked or paused by court injunctions. As shown in Exhibit 14 on page 20, as of November 30th, a total of 219 awards have been canceled. Of the total award amount of $266.4 million, $133.3 million have been canceled. At $49.9 million, UMB lost the most revenue from canceled award, followed by College Park at $32.9 million and UMBC at $21.1 million. Exhibit 15 on page 21 shows canceled awards by agencies, and while 54, National Science Foundation canceled the most awards in terms of dollars, NIH accounted for over the third of the lost revenue. In addition to the implementations of staff work orders, rescoping awards, and new compliance requirements have caused a lot of uncertainty and increased workloads for administration, accounting, and legal counsels due to appeals, reinstatements, and compliance with defend the spend, which requires detailed justification for every drawdown on an award. Furthermore, as a result of cancellations, UMB has laid off 100 positions and 250 more are in jeopardy if the cancellations continue. Turning to the budget on page 22, the fiscal 26 budget reduces USM's appropriation by 7% or $155.5 million. USM received $79.9 million for general salary increase and used $43.1 million for union employees and COLA for employees. And the remaining $38.6 million was used to partially offset the reductions, resulting in a total reduction of $118.7 million. As shown in Exhibit 16, most of these reductions were met by eliminating 225 vacant positions and 53 filled positions. In addition, 5 institutions offset part of the reductions through tuition or fee increases or increases in tuition revenue related to an increase of out-of-state students. Exhibit 17 on page 23 shows one-time funding added during the last session that totaled $12.5 million. And there's a discussion of the use of these funds starting at the bottom of the page and continuing on to the next. I just wanted to highlight that $27.5 million of funding was added for the Quantum Initiative, and that is discussed on the bottom of page 24. So $10 million was being used for a new headquarters for IonCube, which is a quantum computing company. And the $17.5 million from the dedicated purpose account is being used to expand the quantum startup foundry and hire personnel, including test experts and faculty. Exhibit 18 on page 25 shows the proposed budget. Overall, after adjusting for contingent reductions and a plan reversion, state funds increased 2.3% or $50.9 million. I just also note that restricted funds are projected to decrease by $56.1 million, of which $50.2 million is attributed to a decline in federal grants and contracts. And also note that the allowance does include $42 million in the dedicated purpose account, of which USM would receive $25 million to allocate amongst institutions, which is to assist higher education institutes, research centers to transition to energy, resiliency, and climate-related research. We asked the Chancellor to comment on the criteria that will be used to allocate these funds. Exhibit 19 on page 27 illustrates the puts and takes to the allowance. Overall, state funding increased by $114.5 million, which included $5.5 million in mandated funding, $14 million to continue funding the Quantum Initiative at College Park, $54.8 million primarily related to increase in health insurance, and $35.7 million for generally salary increases that are budgeted centrally in DBM. These increases are partly offset by $63.4 million in decreases, which include $30.7 million related to increasing turnover, and $18.5 million related to removal of one-time funding, and $1.8 million reduction to Bowie's allocation of HBCU settlement funds. Exhibit 20 on page 29 shows funding per full-time student. And as you see in 23, there was a jump in the funding that is related to a variety of factors, including general salary increases, restoration of the 21 BPW cost containment actions, and the first year the HBCUs received settlement funds. On average, Bowie, COPPA, and UMES funding increased by about $5,500 per full-time equivalent student due to the settlement funding. The decline in funding per FTES in 25 at COPPA and UMES is due to enrollment growth of over 9% at both institutions. And at almost at $38,000 per FTES, COPPA has the highest funding, followed by University of Baltimore at $29,000. And now I will turn it over to David for the issues.
Thank you, Sarah. Beginning with Exhibit 21 on page 32. From January 2019 to January 2025, the University of Maryland Global Campus, or UMGC, enhanced its marketing efforts and spent approximately $350 million on a nationwide campaign to raise brand awareness and increase enrollment amidst competition in the online university space. The campaign, which began in the latter half of 2019, had a slow start in terms of generating new enrollment, and new student enrollment declined in fiscal 2022 compared to the prior year. The university attributed this sluggish start to the COVID-19 pandemic, which contributed to a national enrollment decline across higher education. Additionally, there was a delay in the rollout of the Army's new enrollment portal, which led to a 6-month period where no one from the Army could sign up for classes. Military enrollment is a significant portion of UMGC's student population, and the Army accounts for about 40% of all military enrollment. However, things turned around after fiscal 2022, and fiscal years 2023, 24, and 25 experienced new student growth of 9%, 14%, and 11% respectively. Turning to page 33, Exhibit 22 displays revenue growth of 7.7, 10.5, and 10.7% respectively in fiscal years 2023, 24, and 25. UMGC attributed the new enrollment and revenue growth during these years to the marketing campaign and reported that for every $1 spent on advertising, it generated $5.60 in revenue over 4 years. In June of 2025, the Board of Public Works approved a new $246 million 3-year marketing contract for the term July 2025 to June 2028. The Department of Legislative Services recommends adopting committee narrative requesting that UMGC submit a report on its latest national marketing campaign. Moving to page 34, Chapter 450 of 2012 established High Impact Economic Development Activities, or HIDAs, which are initiatives that may be established by certain institutions of higher education to promote the economic interests of the state in areas such as job creation, workforce development, and technology transfer, among others. In calendar 2015, the Board of Regents approved the creation of a HIDA called Helio Campus, which was a spin-off of UMGC's Office of Analytics. In calendar 2016, another HIDA, known as UMGC Ventures, was approved, and Ventures is a holding company for businesses commercialized by the university. Then, in calendar 2017, a spin-off of UMGC's Office of Technology was approved under an entity called Accelerate. The stated purpose of UMGC Ventures was to generate revenue by providing services to institutions of higher education, including UMGC, and proceeds would then be used to reduce costs for Maryland students. Fast forward to August 2024, the Office of Legislative Audits, or OLA, released its fiscal compliance audit covering the period of October 2018 to December 2022, which contained several findings pertaining to UMGC's operations with UMGC Ventures. First, UMGC Ventures sold its controlling interest in Helio Campus, which was the data analytics spinoff, for $26.2 million to a private equity firm and retained 21.1% ownership. OLA found that UMGC was unable to explain the basis of the partial sale, including how the buyer and price were identified. Second, regarding Accelerate, which was the information technology spinoff, OLA identified an abandoned information technology product that cost $25.7 million. Additionally, $11.3 million of contingency fees for other IT services were paid without providing documentation to demonstrate why they were necessary, and minimal business as a percentage of total revenue was being done with entities besides UMGC. Following this audit, in May 2025, a consultant presented UMGC with an assessment of the university's technology management, which detailed several scenarios for UMGC Ventures and Accelerate. UMGC then decided to reintegrate Accelerate and UMGC Ventures into the university, and the Board of Regents approved this maneuver in June of 2025. Since then, UMGC has created an organizational structure and began hiring for positions to fill its newly reabsorbed Information Technology Office. UMGC should comment on the current status of Accelerate's reintegration, including the onboarding of new staff and timeline for full integration. DLS also recommends adopting committee narrative requesting information on the reintegration of UMGC Ventures and Accelerate, including the status of ongoing contracts and recovery of original seed investments. And that concludes our portion of the presentation.
Thank you so much for your analysis. Are there any questions for our analysts? Seeing none, thank you so much. We welcome Chancellor Perman and his team. And feel free to introduce or highlight any other system leaders that are in the audience today as well. Great to see you.
Thank you, Chair Smith, Vice Chair Wolick, committee members. We appreciate the time before you, and I'm happy to testify in support of the governor's budget proposal for the USM. As always, I thank Ms. Baker and Mr. Probert for their analysis. With me today are Linda Gooden, Chair of our Board of Regents, and Senior Vice Chancellor Ellen Herbst and Allison Rinn. In addition, I have great support behind me. They're usually in front of me. President Ginsburg, President LaPree, President Fowler, President Anderson, President Morales-Wilhelm. I hope I'm not leaving anyone out. As I join you this year, I need to reflect first on last year. In 2025, I knew there'd be one more. President Shears Ashby, of course. Did I leave anybody else out? In 2025, the system achieved some remarkable progress, record-setting progress. To be sure, we have confronted and we continue to confront new and serious challenges that could put the progress at risk. But for a moment, please let me start with the progress. Last fall, the system's enrollment climbed to 175,700 students. That's the second highest in our history. Very encouragingly, our first-year class broke an all-time record. And assuming we're successful at retaining, our enrollment will climb. Our transfer class broke an all-time record. Together, our HBCUs posted a fourth straight year of growth. Bookending this growth in students entering the USM is growth in students leaving the USM with a high-value degree. We awarded 45,000 degrees last year, the most we ever have. So, you know, national polls, yeah, they keep asking whether college is worth it. We don't trivialize that, but I think our students have answered. They're coming. They're coming in increasing numbers. So it's on us to keep college within their reach, to keep college within the reach of any Marylander who wants it. That's what we insist on. And by the way, access isn't all about affordability. In my answers to the analysts' questions, I'll talk about our work in recruitment and retention, in education pathways, but yes, money is often the toughest obstacle to surmount. So we're keeping a USM education affordable with an in-state cost that comes in under the national average and well under the cost in nearby states. We're providing record-setting aid, reaching out to as many as we can who need help. Last year, as was pointed out, $107 million in university aid went to more than 27,000 students who might have been shut out of higher education without it. And in total, we awarded $265 million in aid. That's what support does. Right now, we need the underpinnings for that support more than ever, because there is a federal landscape newly antagonistic to higher education, and we are confronting risks that impinge on our potential enrollment, our research, our ability to help students. We are going to put students first. They are the people we serve. They are the core of the work we do, because we know that the state's educated, in-demand workforce is a primary advantage in Maryland. And we also know, thanks to your support, that the USM is its chief supplier. So I thank you for recognizing the pressures we're facing. We certainly recognize the pressures you're facing. Thank you for valuing our partnership in educating Maryland's citizens. Now, let me address the questions posed by our analysts. The first asks me to comment on challenges our universities have faced in maintaining and growing undergraduate enrollment and what we're doing to address those challenges. Enrollment at most of our universities has grown post-COVID. As I mentioned, this year, we have our second highest undergraduate head count in history. Part of that growth is a credit to the size of the first-year classes at some of our biggest universities, helping them recover pandemic-era losses. But those earlier COVID-era losses do persist because smaller class sizes carry through successive years until those students graduate. The reasons for enrollment challenges at some of our universities aren't particularly unique. They are often our smaller regional comprehensives that recruit from a fairly local area, and they also attract a high percentage of part-time working students. Those are students who need financial aid, but might not get enough to stay in school. As I've said, this is why financial aid is so important to us. More online and hybrid courses often meet these students' needs, and that is a strategy that many of our universities are taking up. Some examples. One of Frostburg's strategies is prioritizing outreach to Hispanic learners. That's Maryland's fastest growing student group. Frostburg has seen a 6% climb in Hispanic applications over last year, which is a credit to efforts like geo-targeted Spanish language advertising and a Spanish language microsite. Let me mention two of our HBCUs. Coppin and UMES now offer in-state tuition to out-of-state students who can't easily access an HBCU of their own. Many states in our country do not have HBCUs. I think we're doing the right thing, and we're growing our enrollment, and you know, the attraction that we demonstrate to out-of-state students writ large is an advantage to Maryland. If you get them in the door, they might stay, and we have some evidence in that regard. UMES has its fourth straight year of growth, Coppin its third. Coppin's undergraduate enrollment jumped 30% in 1 year. Its first-time class size jumped 60%. Across the state, our universities continue to recruit with strategies that are both traditional and technology-based, people-driven, platform-driven. Everything's on the table, how they identify students, how they market themselves to those students, how they respond quickly to those students and stay in touch with them after they've admitted them, how they package their aid. And the focus isn't just on who they're yielding, it's on who they're not. And by that I mean students from certain regions, certain communities, certain backgrounds. They're looking at who they don't get and working to turn the tide. And that isn't just for universities with challenged enrollments. It's for everyone in our system. College Park, which has plenty of applications, is engaging rural students because they weren't there in the appropriate numbers. They're covering costs for high-need students. Towson and UMBC are targeting students from Baltimore City, offering residency experiences, bridge programs, tuition support. So it's a who's not here and what are we going to do about it? And our transfer students. We have 39,000 new transfer students this year from 2-year schools, from 4-year schools, making up 29% of all USM undergrads. And while out-of-state transfers to UMGC are climbing, so are the local 2-year transfers, maybe a little more slowly than we want. But Maryland community colleges are now rebounding. They're continuing their post-pandemic rebound. That impinges on us in a good way. To strengthen the Maryland pipeline, we've worked with colleagues, partners in the community college systems. We've worked with MHEC. We've engaged in the Maryland Transfer Incentive, building clearer direct pathways and removing barriers that inhibit efficient transfer. I just saw an op-ed out west in the Cumberland Times, written by our interim president at Frostburg and the president of Allegheny Community College. The content of the op-ed is important, but the two authors and who they are is even more important and an example to us. We continue to improve ARTSIS. That's the statewide transfer platform with more course equivalencies, more program transfer guides. And in something I talk a great deal about, we're working to expand early college so that we can straighten and streamline this pathway from K-12 schools to two-year colleges to USM universities. Our colleague analyst, Sarah Baker, talks appropriately about something that everybody talks about, the enrollment cliff, which fortunately is going to be delayed in Maryland. And I would just point out that this guy, given my responsibilities, would be very worried about the enrollment cliff if I could sit here and say that the system or higher ed in general in Maryland gets everybody who comes out. Then it would be a real worry. I'm an optimist, and I see all these kids, I'm talking about K-12 now, they don't graduate high school. What about them? We've got to find ways to attract, not because we need the enrollment, although certainly I'll take it. We've got to find ways to attract these kids so that they can have a better life and so that Maryland can benefit from them in all the ways that you know working people benefit the state, because you're the ones that have to keep the purse. Next, I'm asked to comment on factors affecting retention rates and efforts to improve them. Retention, it's great to get students in the door, but the real art form is pulling them through to graduation. It's the single biggest piece of enrollment. And the single most important thing keeping students in school, and the analyst pointed it out, is making sure that they have the money to stay in school. So I mentioned the numbers, $265 million total aid, $107 million from us in need-based aid. Let me tell you what that money does in terms of statistics. This is our data that we've gathered and that we're going to publish. Among first-time students who received any kind of university aid, in any amount, 85% persisted to their second year without aid. The retention rate was 74%, an 11% difference. With university aid, 67% of those first-time students graduated within 6 years. Without aid, it drops to 53%. For students coming to us from a Maryland community college, the gaps are still wider. Retention with aid is 85%, drops to 73% without. Graduation is 74% with aid, 54% without. You all give scholarships to constituents. And sometimes people say it's not enough money. Here's the data. Any money is significant. It makes a difference. So university aid will remain a priority, especially as students and families may not be able to continue to rely on the state CA grants to fill their cost gaps. Now, retention is not all about money. It's often about non-financial supports. So in these bad times, we're still holding, we've received a $4 million grant from the U.S. Department of Education to launch a peer-to-peer mentoring program system-wide. These mentors, peers, help underserved students navigate college. You can go here for help. Did you know about this? Help them access the many academic and social supports that we have in the universities, but are often not accessed. Universities are using technology as well in order to spot the challenged student early, students who are struggling. If a student misses a class, misses an assignment, fails an exam, it triggers advising and support interventions to get the student back on track before they've spiraled down too far, and I'm quitting. Universities are incorporating student assessment early in the course for the same reason. Again, intervene early to stop the slide. Student gets a D at the end without plenty of feedback before. We should do better than that. Those are academic interventions. But beyond the academic interventions, we're trying to spot students that need housing. Yes, we have homeless students. We have plenty of students, I'm sad to say, with food insecurity. And we've stood up pantries at all our campuses. This is all part of student success, otherwise you lose the student. Behavioral and mental health challenges, of course. Next, I'm asked to discuss criteria that will be used to allocate funds from the dedicated purpose accounts to our universities. We are very grateful for the governor's $25 million allocation for research initiatives. As I detail in my written testimony, and we heard some of this in the analysis, over the last year, our universities have had 219 grant awards canceled, totaling $133 million. NIH terminations alone total $51 million. That's money that means jobs, and certainly for somebody who has another profession as well, and all of you, even more important, this is money that funds critical health, biomedical research. We are encouraged by recent budget bills passed by Congress that restore funding to U.S. science agencies and prohibit deviation from negotiated reimbursement rates for indirect research costs. You've heard this attack over the past year on indirect costs, which are the overhead costs to house the research, to regulate the research, et cetera. Earlier proposals were to slash that reimbursement rate to 15%. Just by way of comparison, the institution that I used to lead has a reimbursement rate in the 50s to 15%. Would devastate the research enterprise. But no victory yet. Real risks remain, even if the agency's prior year funding levels are restored. There is going to be lasting damage to programs that maybe not canceled, but that the federal administration has deprioritized. Things like public health, health equity, climate, energy, sustainability. So things may go back in order, but these are not priority areas. So we're eager to work with the governor's office and with key stakeholders on an allocation strategy that invests in these deprioritized research areas, that serves Maryland's critical needs, and also aligns with what we do well, with the deep expertise at our universities. Now, finally, UMGC was asked to comment on the current status of Accelerad's reintegration, including staff onboarding and the full timeline. So UMGC has reestablished its internal Office of Information Technology, completed staffing it with 175 FTEs, former Accelerate employees and external applicants, and through this integration, UMGC now directly manages and maintains a comprehensive IT infrastructure on a budget of about $48 million. So this transition back has strengthened UMGC's student-facing digital environment, the services it provides to adult and military learners, and also agility, capacity, and sustainability of university operations. Contracts that were previously administered by UMGC Ventures at Accelerate are now being transitioned to UMGC in alignment with the system's procurement procedures. Two major contracts, one for IT help desk services, one for IT staff augmentation, are moving through our Board of Regents and are expected to go to the Board of Public Works in March. All remaining smaller contracts are in active procurement, and they will transition no later than June 30th. Thank you for your patience with me. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you for your response, and also just think it's worth acknowledging these are really sobering times for higher ed. You were able to balance some of the bright spots while also being candid about where the challenges persist. And we stand ready to work not only with you, but to the extent practical with our federal partners to, kind of gain ground or just return to what was a bit more normal. I also know that you have a few other leaders here with you. I don't know if there's any additional testimony from your team? No? Are there any questions for the Chancellor or his team? Yes, Delegate Tolles.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I have a few questions, and so thank you, Mr. Chancellor, for being here. Always good to see you.
Thank you, the same.
Thank you. I'm going to start with where you just left off for the advertising campaign for the Global Campus. And I know that's probably started before I became a member of the committee, but I want to, and I know that we're waiting on a report for the end of this year, but can you talk about if there are other universities in the system that have such a global advertising, well, not global because they're the only global campus, but an advertising campaign such as this?
Maybe I'm being inappropriate. Thank you for the question, Delegate. No. I wish we did have a budget that is appropriate to the marketing that we do need to do. Mm-hmm. We found in doing with a consultant several years ago that Marylanders are certainly aware, they're acutely aware, and they should be aware and proud of our flagship campus and our larger campuses, but they're not as aware as they should be about all that you've invested in and all that is fine about our 12 universities. They're not aware of what is our feature as a system. I often say, and again, pick a franchise, I usually use McDonald's. Mm-hmm. We are not 12 McDonald's. Mm-hmm. The opposite. We are unique. You can find what you want in higher education in the state of Maryland, but we've not invested sufficiently in getting the message out. So we are putting what dollars we can invest in a system marketing campaign that really is not to tout the system alone, but what the system can do to add value and also feature what is going on at our other institutions. Again, with regard to enrollment, if we want to talk what's the impact of marketing, we still have too many students in Maryland who, when not getting in to the flagship, which has only so much capacity, don't realize the opportunity that they have to stay in Maryland with low-cost tuition that you've all helped us with. We have to get that work out. So the response is, we don't market with the other institutions to nearly what we do with UMGC. UMGC has to. It's in a very competitive market where there are institutions nationwide, you hear them advertised, they're for profit. So that's a different kettle of fish. I'm being long-winded. I wish we marketed more, and we're going to do as much as we can.
Okay. And I ask that because I know that, as you indicated, a lot of, students like to do work online, like to do, their studies online.
Yes.
But we obviously have, these fantastic institutions within our system that have in person. And so I just want to be certain that, we try to do what we can to market that in person as much as I know we do. And I know it's hard. If we had unlimited money, as you indicated, we could do a lot of marketing. But I just don't want, I'm just cautious in terms of ensuring that, we have that marketing. And I bring that up because I met with University of Baltimore yesterday, and obviously their undergraduate program, they're trying to really, boost that back up. And I, was generally, I'm alum, so generally a little bit of concern, not of the undergrad, of the law school, as you know. But I just wanted to ensure that we do what we can to support that institution as well, because folks are, if they have opportunities to do global campus, they do that. But unfortunately, the unintended consequence could be University of Baltimore. Other institutions within our system can be unintentionally, jeopardized.
I'm so happy, Delegate, that you're saying this.
Okay.
Because it's totally consistent with the way we think. I'll acknowledge to all of you that in the throes of COVID, I didn't know what the future was of a residential campus or a campus like the University of Baltimore, which serves so many non-traditional learners, working folks, et cetera. I didn't know if that had a future. I think our numbers are beginning to show, and some of the institutions are challenged, particularly the regional comprehensives, but there is clearly a demand on the part of students for either a residential campus experience where they get the benefits that we all experienced on traditional college campuses. We're committed to that. And there are also need for the student that is working, has got a family, wants to reskill or get some new skills, who can take advantage of a University of Baltimore, where so much of what goes on in the evening. Totally with you.
I know. I was a 4-year evening student in law school. It was brutal. So definitely I'm biased to that support needed. Madam Chair, just a couple follow-up questions. Thank you so much. And so thank you for those, comments. I do want to also talk about something you discussed in terms of the expanding the early college from K through 12, through the 2-year, through the 4-year. That's another conversation I had with the University of Baltimore. I know they've done some of that in the Baltimore City area, have been wonderful success on that. And so I wanted to know if there's been discussion with the superintendent, the state superintendent, to ensure that we can do more of that. I actually just texted my school system. They used to have, they just told me they don't have it any longer at one of the schools in my district, like a pre-law program for high school. So I thought that would be fantastic to be able to start, with that K through 12, through the 2-year, through the 4-year, and maybe even to a graduate program in law school if they're interested in that. So do you know how is that relationship with the state superintendent to ensure we can do more of that across our system?
Again, Delegate, I'm exceedingly grateful for your question.
Well, thank you, because I'm new to the committee, so I'm just trying to be good.
Let me respond, because
Yeah.
when we are finished with our testimony to you all, I'm going across the hall to testify in support of a bill that is sponsored by Delegate Patterson to drive early college in Maryland. You talk about your alma mater. UBalt has 800 dual enrollment students from the Baltimore City schools. And the evidence is clear. When students get exposure to a college education while they're in high school, students who never thought about college, students who have no hope of college because they don't hear it in the house, they are more likely to go to college, and not only go, they're more likely to persist and graduate and get a good job. We're focused on early college as sort of a, if you will, dual enrollment on steroids, because early college envisions starting earlier in high school and thinking about pathway. The bill that we're starting with across the hall is focused on developing teachers in Southern Maryland. But all of this has to be scalable. Right. We're not doing well with early college in Maryland, and we need to do better. And it's exactly the way you describe. High school, maybe to community college, to the 4-year, and for those who aspire to be a professional or get a doctorate, beyond. It's got to be knitted together. And in response to your question, I just saw our wonderful state superintendent an hour ago. Yeah. She did it in Mississippi. She is a partner.
Okay, thank you. And one final thing, Madam Chair, and I've posed this to all the universities. Probably my colleagues are tired of hearing it, and we're going to talk about it. I really am looking to advance a student loan forgiveness program in Maryland. On page 16, you talked about, first-generation students having challenges, and students can't get their aid. We see, retention issues, and you spelled it out nicely. Student loans is critically important to students, particularly first generation, because they need it not just for student services. And shout out to President Wilson, who came in and gave a great overview of why that's important as well, particularly with our HBCUs. And so is that something that you can support, particularly because the legislation is geared toward hiring students if they go to a school in Maryland and they work within our state institution, not state, but within the state of Maryland, within parameters, particularly our state government, to get their student loan forgiven after 10 years. We know that there's been a lot of federal cuts that's impacting our universities, and we want to be able to support those individuals that want to get a higher education, but having a problem of affordability. Is that a legislation, you think that you can support?
Well, again, thank you, and I will try to mind my time because I could give you a very long response on this. The state has a loan forgiveness program, right, not to do what you're talking about, but focused on professionals, particularly health professionals, getting them not just to rural parts of the state where places are challenged. I've spent a lot of my professional time here in West Baltimore. That's another area, and it's not rural, where you can't get health professionals. You don't find many doctors in West Baltimore. So the state put together a program a long time ago called LARP, the Loan Assistance Repayment Program. It's a great program. there's just not sufficient money in it. And that's what I'm worried. Am I supportive of loan forgiveness? For sure. But it's got to be funded.
Oh, of course, absolutely, but we'll
Yeah.
keep talking. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Are there any additional questions for the Chancellor or this panel? All right, seeing none, we just have one additional member of the public that is registered to give favorable with amendments. Is Ms. Dion Williams here with us today? Oh, there you are. Great to see you. Please come forward. Thank you, Ms. Williams, for coming forward, and you have 2 minutes to testify. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Dion Williams, and I'm a union steward with AFSCME Local 1072, and I was also on our USM bargaining team. I'm here to testify on behalf of the over 6,200 staff that AFSCME represents across the University of Maryland system. First, I want to thank the state for including enough funding in the fiscal year 27 budget to support our negotiated wage increases. We hope the legislature supports our agreement as we represent the lowest paid employees in the system who are struggling with the same affordability issues all Marylanders are struggling with right now. I'm pleased to report that we have begun to build a better relationship with the Chancellor and leadership at the USM office. However, system-wide and campus issues do remain. At the system level, we are awaiting results of a classification and compensation study this spring. This study will inform our USM-wide negotiations this fall. We have been concerned about ongoing classification issues within the system. There are a number of staff titles misclassified, and we noticed that the resolution on this matter differs across campus, from campus to campus instead of centrally. Now, in the past year, when the General Assembly has imposed cuts on the system, these cuts haven't been felt equally. Our larger campuses with more resources and reserves have been able to absorb budget actions far better than the smaller and rural campuses. In fact, we saw direct results of this with layoffs at Frostburg and University of Baltimore last year. We would ask when fund reductions are contemplated by the legislature that they work collaboratively with AFSCME to ensure that a more fair and more equitable action is taken. Now, on page 30 of the analysis, you see that there are over 7,000 contractual employees. And at the campus level, we are seeing an erosion of our bargaining units with costly outside contractors doing the work of AFSCME members. Now, I need you to understand what this looks like on our campuses.
Ma'am, I just need you to quickly summarize. 2 minutes has elapsed.
These are housekeeping staff at University College Park, ground staff at UMBC, HVAC workers at UMES, and residential maintenance at BSU, and virtually all blue-collar employees at Coppin State. Additionally, thousands of staff continue to be hired on a contractual basis, and they do the work by our unionized members. And our employees are caught in this second-class contingent status typically for 2 years or more, without having full health care and retirement benefits, as well as no union coverage. And we just want what our executive branch has been able to do with the leadership of the Moore administration. And that means converting contractuals to full-time merit
Please summarize
positions.
quickly. Your 2 minutes has gone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay. Just real quick. Finally, we just.
Very quickly.
Finally, we just ask for your help as we lock in our telework bargaining. And we just continue to ask that we keep in mind telework opportunities for campuses. It's good for employee morale.
Thank you
good
so
the
much for your
environment.
testimony. Appreciate you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And that concludes the budget hearing. I believe there's no other witnesses that I've seen registered for the USM system. Thank you so much. We're moving on. The next budget we'll be hearing is West North Avenue Development. We'll begin with our budget analyst, Elizabeth Weibel. And I just want to acknowledge I may have to step out for a bill hearing of my own, but we have our steady vice chair.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be presenting the budget analysis for the West North Avenue Development Authority, or WNADA, which is an economic development agency focused on a section of West North Avenue in Baltimore City. WNADA's fiscal 2027 budget decreases overall by about $2.7 million, or 12%. $1.2 million of that decrease is due to a fiscal 2026 deficiency appropriation to restore funds that were reverted in error at the end of fiscal 25. On page 2 is a breakdown of changes made to the fiscal 2026 budget since last year's budget hearings. Some of those are due to legislation last year that officially made WNADA an economic development agency and established a special fund for it. The legislation also gave the agency some new authorities and required it to be self-sustaining by fiscal 2028. The 2026 budget as enacted appropriated $19 million for WNADA's grant program in fiscal 2026. And as you can see in Exhibit 1, the WNADA board has reallocated $10 million of that to establish a new loan program. And they've also reallocated about $1.6 million from grants to operational costs, primarily for contracts. Reallocating grant funds to cover operational costs has been a recurring issue for WNADA, and that's discussed on pages 5 and 6 of the analysis. The agency's budget is under a single program, which allows the agency to reallocate funds to various purposes throughout the year without having a budget amendment. And contract costs in particular have been much higher than what is programmed in the budget books. Exhibit 4 shows that contract costs in the budget books have consistently been programmed below $200,000, including in the fiscal 2027 budget. However, actual spending has never been less than $300,000. In fiscal 2025 and in the fiscal 2026 budget adopted by the board, contract costs are over $1 million annually. So even though the governor's fiscal 2027 budget books show $174,000 for contract costs, they're probably going to be more like 1.8 million, which means that less will be available for grant funding. And DLS has asked WNADA to comment on the major areas of contract expenses in fiscal 2026, and if the agency expects these contracts to continue to be needed in 2027. DLS also recommends that the committees adopt narrative requesting that WNADA and DBM work together to program more realistic budgets in the future that minimize the need to reallocate funding away from grants. The personnel discussion starts on page 6. WNADA has 15 regular positions, and of these, 6 positions, or 40%, are vacant. WNADA reports that these were affected by the hiring freeze, which was lifted in October, but they have had difficulty attracting and retaining staff overall. Some of the factors are outside of the agency's control, such as the hiring freeze and the agency's sunset clause, but others are things that the agency could address, such as requiring in-person work and late nights, often until 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And DLS has asked WNADA to comment on its efforts to fill vacant positions. On page 7, there's an update on WNADA's grant program. In fiscal 2025, the agency awarded 33 grants totaling about $13 million. And Exhibit 5 shows the different categories of grant funding. Just over half of the grant funding was for economic development projects, and about 28% was for housing. Exhibit 6 shows some of the managing results metrics for WNADA's first 2 years as a state agency. And these track the number of developers or families supported and the amount of grant support awarded. DLS has asked WNADA to comment on the feasibility of adding some broader outcome metrics to the MFR submission, such as vacancy rates for the area and population. If those are something that WNADA is able to track on an annual basis and add to its MFR reporting, that could be a way to gauge the agency's effectiveness. Page 9 summarizes the legislative changes made to WNADA last year. Legislation gave the agency new powers and tools and required it to be self-sustaining by fiscal 2028. The requirement to be self-sustaining is one of the reasons for establishing a loan program, and DLS has asked WNADA to provide an update on its plans to offer loans. The legislation also set a sunset date in the first quarter of 23 for the agency, which doesn't give it much time to ramp up operations, become self-sustaining, and then either terminate or reincorporate as a non-state entity. And WNADA is required to report on its progress toward becoming self-sustaining by January 1st of 2027. DLS recommendation is on page 10, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much for your analysis. Are there any questions for the analyst? Seeing none, thank you. We will now hear from the Executive Director of WNADA, Chad Williams, and there are no other witnesses from the public that are signed up to speak, so the focus is all on you, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and committees members. It's good to see everyone again. For the record, Chad Williams, Executive Director of the State of Maryland's West North Avenue Development Authority. And for this year, I'm having my colleague, our Senior Policy Analyst, Christy Turner, join us. As you know, the West North Avenue Development Authority was established to create a revitalization plan for the West North Avenue corridor where residents and businesses can thrive. As the budget analyst stated, with the approval of SB 4 and HB 258 last year, this gives the authority the tools to hopefully become self-sufficient as soon as possible. The authority in January 2024 completed a comprehensive plan which was submitted to the governor and the General Assembly. During this last session, our agency actually included now arts and culture, neighborhood development as part of our overall revitalization plan. This current fiscal year, our agency has completed a robust planning plan, which is mostly of our contractual expenses this fiscal year and last year. We created a hyperlink so that you can see those future plans of West North Avenue, where you can see our housing, economic, trans-oriented development, revitalization of green spaces all along West North Avenue. One of the things that the committee and our budget analyst has asked us is for economic impact analysis. We contracted with the University of Baltimore to do an economic impact analysis, and in that analysis, it was determined that over the 15 years period, which I have stated when I first started, that we need a 15-year period for full revitalization to happen, that based on our objective strategies and approaches, a total aggregated of construction expenditures of $290 million will support $473 million of economic development activity for the state of Maryland, which will generate into approximately 450 vacant and blighted homes being rehabbed and bringing population, sales, and income taxes to the area, and 750 multifamily units. WNODA's direct funding redevelopment is approximately around 31% of our total construction impact. We try to go no more than 40% and make sure that that's leveraged by private investment. To date, in housing development, WNODA has acquired 70 vacant and blighted residential properties, with 16 being completed, 54 are currently under construction, and we have in the pipeline 30 more. This exactly totals about 100 houses of vacant and blighted single-family homes that will come online in less than 3 years of fiscal operation for our agency. In addition, one thing about housing I'll just point out is that we've also funded and partnered with a Black female developer to turn a segregated school, an old segregated school, into student housing for Coppin State University, a HBCU. On our economic and development, we have acquired $6.8 million through grants and acquisition, 6.8 acres of vacant and abandoned land. 2.5 of that is the historic Greenwood towing site, if people are familiar, in Baltimore, one of the largest vacant and abandoned sites in Baltimore City and in the state of Maryland, with a vision to turn that into a mixed-use residential, commercial, and entertainment destination, similar to what I would say is City Center in Washington, D.C. We also acquired 1.5 acres at the 600 block of West North Avenue, which we are now turning into a street market grocery store to address the food desert in the Reservoir Hill neighborhood. As far as transportation, we partnered with the Graham Project and OpenWorks to improve transit services and pedestrian safety along the West North Avenue corridor, and particularly at the West North Avenue McCullough and Jewett Hill Avenue. With neighborhood development and social connectivity, something that we started to work in towards this year. We are pleased that Delegate Wallach and also Senator Hayes are sponsoring the WNODA Neighborhood Social Connection and Development Act. That act will help to invest social connectivity, will helping neighbors and families build relationships through organized, consistent events such as block parties, cultural festivals, recreational gathering, and also provide some type of incentive for folks to just collaborate more together. This is one of the reasons why I asked the CEO of Elevate, Alex Adams, to come join me. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to support her last week during her testimony, but I wanted to let the committee know that WNOTA is a firm supporter and an alliance in economic development through the Enough Act with Elevate. These efforts will further help through arts and culture development. As you know, we invested in the Mill on North on West North Avenue, where we provided a food hall for 6 Black food vendors. And on an average, they generate now $27,000 in sales tax for the state of Maryland on the weekends. In public safety, unfortunately, as you know, there are many challenges at the Penn North area, but we've invested in public safety teams for cleanliness, maintenance, residential resources, and crime prevention. In fact, our crime prevention through environmental design actually won an award last year through the Crime Prevention and Environmental Design Institute. And last, one of the things I will say from my testimony is that we continue to increase and challenge ourselves in meeting and exceeding the MBE goal. As you know, the state of Maryland has an MBE goal of 29%, I believe. The first year we exceeded that by 43%. The second fiscal year, we exceeded that at 48%. This past fiscal year, we achieved a 55.5% MBE rating. I believe that's one of the highest in the state. In answering some of the responses to our budget analysts, the first question, WNOTA should comment on major areas of contract expenses. One of those major areas of contract expenses has been over the past few years is approximately our planning and development activities that we've done. That will significantly start to reduce over time. However, we will be moving into a state office building that we're building along West North Avenue, and that will be coming with some challenges with building security based on where we're located. We fully support the analyst's recommendation that we work with DBM to ensure that we have appropriate funding for contracts and also our personnel and salaries. The feasibility of tracking additional metrics, yes, we can and put that into our MFR. However, I did provide some hyperlinks to other performance measurements that we do, and we actually presented a performance measurement dashboard at our last board meeting in December for our grantees, and you can see how our grantees are actually performing. And it's something I think I would recommend for all other state agencies. And then last, WNOTA should provide an update on its plans for its loan program. We are scheduled to have the WNOTA Governing Board review and discuss and hopefully approve that WNOTA loan program on March 30th and start dispersing loans on April 1st. And with that, I would conclude my testimony and answer any questions, delegates. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Executive Director Williams, wonderful to see you again. Are there any questions? All right. Well, I'll just say that, it was a pleasure to come out and see you.
Sorry, I was late.
Oh, okay, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Executive Director Williams, and thank you for the energy you're putting into your project. Can you talk a little bit more about the contracts and how you're going to tackle that in the future? Like, what were you spending the money on, and how are you going to a little more solid?
Yeah, sure. So on an average, we were averaging between $250,000 to about $350,000 annually for planning contracts, primarily with WSP, Quinn Evans, Inspire Green Space, which is a minority planning firm. And those contracts cover conceptual drawings, designs, neighborhood engagement, activities, and we put that in our testimony as a hyperlink. As we move forward, we see those costs decreasing significantly as we move now to issuing RFPs for our focused development nodes for developers to team with us in developing on those concepts. So we see a significant reduction in that. However, I will be honest, I am concerned about as we get into acquisition of property, how we're going to have to do contracts for building security, secure those. We are in a very challenging area of the city where we operate, which is known for fires, for folks going in there to avoid the cold. So I think we'll have to see how that goes, but we will always try to be very good stewards of the public funds.
Thank you. So you're planning and now you're recognizing some of the plans and they're going to come to fruition. And
Yes,
so that's
ma'am.
what it was. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I really, the mill is amazing. So
Thanks.
good, keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thanks.
Delegate Tolles?
Thank you so much. I just got to jump in here late as well. Good to see you, Chad. I know you're not used to seeing me in this committee, but I'm used to seeing Chad out in the county somewhere or doing the work that he does. So good to see you. And Delegate Forbes answered one of my questions I was thinking about. So just one question, can you discuss the agency's termination date? Would that mean that the funding from the state would cease and you would be self-sufficient?
Yeah, so that is the current intention of the legislation, that the agency would sunset, and obviously we would no longer be a state agency and we would have to be self-sufficient. Publicly, I've always said that this is a termination of the General Assembly. I believe that our representatives in the 40th district will probably like to reevaluate that in the next session, which I think is fair when the General Assembly can actually evaluate the performance of the agency after about 6 years. And now that we see the production that we're doing, then that's a determination for the General Assembly. I've usually kind of avoided that sunset question in public.
I'm sorry. Thank you so
Yeah,
much,
sure.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the community. I had the pleasure of seeing you and your team in action. You are, really bringing a lot of progress to that part of Baltimore, and I'm excited to see you continue the work. So thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a good afternoon. All right. Bye.
All right. So I think we will move on to the budget hearing for the Center for Environmental Science and begin with our budget analyst, Ms. Sarah Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to start on page 1, and you'll see the overall budget decreases 0.01% or over $7,000 in the fiscal 27 allowance to $63.1 million. Exhibit 1 on page 2 show federal awards that have been canceled, and as last November, CEAS has 7 awards canceled, and this has resulted in a loss of $2.2 million, of which half is related to the cancellation of 2 awards from EPA. So we asked the president to comment on the impact of having awards canceled, rescoping of awards, and new compliance requirements have had on research, and also the pace of awarding of the new contracts. Moving to the budget on page 3, the fiscal 26 budget reduced USM's appropriation by 7%, of which SHE's shares was $2 million. This was partly offset by $500,000 provided for increments, and the remaining $1.5 million was mainly met by eliminating 1 position, not filling 2 positions, and reducing expenditures on contracts. As shown on Exhibit 2 on page 4, expenditures related to personnel account for 66% of the total spending. On page 5, Exhibit 3 shows SEA's proposed budget. State funds increased 2.5% over $700,000 after accounting for a proposed deficiency and a contingent fund swap of higher education funds for general funds. Increases in state funding include over $500,000 primary related to health insurance and over $300,000 for general salary increases that are essentially budgeted in DBM, and over $155,000 for the opening of a new facility. These increases are partly offset by over $238,000 relating to increasing the budgeted turnover. Turning to R&D expenditures, as you see in Exhibit 4 on page 7, expenditures have exceeded $50 million. After declining for 2 years to $51.2 million in 21, expenditures have increased to $54 million in 24. Exhibit 5 on page 8 show expenditures by source with a state and local contract comprising 45% of spending and federal awards for 31%. Exhibit 6 on page 9 shows the number of bay restoration projects UMCES has undertaken, and I do note the total number of projects in any given year is driven by grant funding. And the number of total projects has significantly increased since 21, reaching a high of 315 projects in 25. And the recommendation is on page 10, which is to concur with the governor's budget. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Ms. Baker? Okay. Well, in that case, we welcome President Morales-Wilhelm. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Likewise.
You may begin.
Vice Chair Wallach and members of the subcommittee, thank you for allowing me to appear at this hearing in support of the operating budget request for the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, UMCES. My name is Fernando Miralles-Vellum, and I'm serving as the president of UMCES. I've been in this position for just a little bit over 18 months, and it's a great privilege to be before you for the first time today, which doesn't have me nervous at all. To my left, I have Mr. Dave DeMasi, who is our Vice President for Administration and Finance. So any of the difficult questions will go to him. I also want to thank DLS for the thorough analysis that they've made. It certainly makes my understanding, in my job a lot easier. You have my full written testimony, and I just want to highlight a few topics in my remarks today. UMCES has a very unique role in the university system of Maryland and in the state of Maryland, and to advance knowledge and innovation to solve big environmental challenges facing Maryland and the world. UMCES is also very unique in the sense that not only in Maryland but also nationally, UMCES is the only university, not only in Maryland, but in the nation, that is solely focused on the environment. And not only that, but it covers the environment from the mountains in Western Maryland all the way to the coasts in Chesapeake Bay. And this is the only university in the country that does this. And I think probably something also that I want to highlight is that the environment is not just a nice thing to have, clean water, clean air, nice looking landscapes. Everything that we do as economies is built on the back of the environment. When you think about transitioning from high carbon energy to low carbon energy, when you think about artificial intelligence, when you think about just about any economic activity that we do, that is built on the back of the environment. So the environment is not something on the side. The environment is not part of the economy. The environment is the economy. And UMCES is the university in Maryland that is devoted to the environment and therefore to advancing economic development. And in no place is this better reflected nationally than in the Chesapeake Bay, which is a major thrust of our efforts. A large part of Maryland's economy, and certainly a large part of the eastern part of Maryland and the southern part of Maryland's economies, rests on what happens in the Chesapeake Bay. If there's one thing that everyone agrees upon is the Chesapeake Bay needs more oysters, for example. As I'm sure you're aware, UMCES has been one of the critical suppliers of oyster larvae and spat for public fishing bars, for aquaculture, and for restoration efforts. UMCES has been very proud to be a key partner in the state's planned effort to restore oysters in over 1,000 acres within Maryland's portion of the bay. These oyster restoration projects, among the largest in the world, actually, have been highly successful in helping bring back oyster populations, building habitat, supporting economic growth in the Chesapeake Bay. There has been a 4-fold increase in oyster harvest since the restoration began. UMCES received a prestigious National Science Foundation Convergence Accelerator Award, which includes the Maryland Institute College of Art and Salisbury University. The purpose of this award is to prototype a new biomanufacturing process for making calcium carbonate from plant-based compounds. Calcium carbonate is used in many applications such as construction materials, pharmaceuticals, plastics, paper, and food. It's used in vitamins to bolster bone health and in toothpaste as a polishing agent. Again, an example connecting the environment to several parts of the economy. On the educational side, UMCES values systemness, particularly in our educational offerings. We've been important partners in the Marine Estuarine Environmental Science, or MEES program, for decades. Also, less than 3 years ago, UMCES and Frostburg State University began offering an innovative joint program, a master's degree in environmental management. This degree leverages the environmental studies expertise of UMCES with the diverse student body at Frostburg State to prepare leaders who can address 21st century sustainability challenges. I'm glad to report that the program is very well subscribed, and we have already begun graduating students just after 3 years. At UMCES, one of the key aspects of our research is doing science that translates into economic impact. And a key component of this is engaging with the private sector and seeking opportunities to do so, particularly as state budgets are shrinking, and also as the federal funding for research is also shrinking. Engaging with the private sector is an area of opportunity that we've begun to explore very actively. In this respect, a few years ago, we started at our Institute of Marine and Environmental Technology, IMET, in Baltimore, the Philanthropic Investor Network. And this has been growing very much at UMCES, and these are basically donor-funded startup research enterprises. 2 visionary donor groups now provide annual funding of early-stage environmental research at IMET and now at our Appalachian Lab in Western Maryland, where the return on investment is the potential for discovery and exponential impact of success. These gifts have enabled faculty and students who have to pitch their ideas to answer questions that are more typical of your investment company, your startup companies, and provide and develop proof of concept results that are being leveraged for support from traditional funding agencies. So these philanthropic funds are being used as seed funding to then leverage larger awards, coupling that with the interactions with the public sector. Successes of these gifts that I'd like to highlight today are the full identification of the blue crab genome, the purchase of a first mobile radar system in the United States to study regional bird, bat, and insect movement that will make Maryland the hub for knowledge in species migration research, and groundbreaking genetic research to increase climate change resilience of native brook trout in Appalachia. DLS has asked that I comment on the impact that canceled federal grants and contracts, rescoping awards, and new compliance requirements have had on our research and the pace of the awarding of these new grants and contracts. UMCES has lost to or received significant reductions to several federal awards and contracts from multiple agencies. To date, this accounts for approximately a 10% reduction of grants and contracts across our institution. What is also troubling, though, is that many of the programs that have funded UMCES over the years are being rescinded, which means that we're going to see the tail end effects of these reductions for years. So the 10%, I think, is an opener, but I think we're going to see more. This is why we're trying to activate and diversify our sources of research revenue. One of the most significant impacts is the wobble in the federal partnership, particularly in Chesapeake Bay and Oyster Restoration. Last fall, we received the news from NOAA, a key funding partner of UMCES for years, that we were likely to receive a 50% grant cut to our UMCs. I was being hopeful with the 15, and it's still in my head. It's 50 of our grant cut to our UMC's Horn Point Laboratory Oyster Hatchery this year, with the possibility of zero funding in the out years, starting then. We're working very diligently to plug this funding gap. Finally, UMCs concurs with the DLS recommendations and enthusiastically requests approval of the governor's fiscal year 2026 budget for the USM and UMCs. This concludes my remarks, and I look forward to addressing any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Morales-Wilhelm. Thank you. I'm sorry that I didn't get to hear everything, but I do want to say that as a lapsed birder, thank you for the research that you're doing in our flyway, and it's really incredibly important. So I am sorry about the difficulties that you're also navigating, but working together, we're going to have to be creative, and I hope that we can yield what is necessary to continue the good work. Delegate Grice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I appreciate, well, first I'm going to start off with, I mentioned, I think it may have been last week, about our committee tours from a long time ago, maybe I think it was 10 years ago, and one of our stops was the Horn Point Laboratory, and I think that should be another stop for our committee at some point if we go back and doing that track. So now the question I have, so you guys are sort of the research arm for the state of Maryland when it comes to cleaning up the bay, especially when it comes to oysters. And I appreciate that you guys are partnering with the private sector. And what the watermen are telling us is that rotational harvest is critical, especially when you have all the sediment that's sort of laying on top.
Yep.
And the issue that we have in our oyster sanctuaries is that silting over, and we're not getting that rotational harvest. And so is that still a concern? Is what you guys are finding in your research, does it align with, with the concerns that the watermen are having in that regard? Yes,
and indeed, and I think it's just like you described it. We are, we're working at ways to increase rotation, try to optimize how the oyster harvesting is done to minimize the adverse impacts. It's a complex problem because the bay is the recipient of all sorts of flows from 6 states, but we are, we're very active in addressing that issue, and we work very closely with the waterman community in our surrounding labs.
Thank you.
If I could just add, thank you, Delegate. The one thing I would say, in the area, our researchers have really found that in the areas where there's high sedimentation, regardless of the causes of that high sedimentation, it is going to be very difficult to bring back oysters into those regions. And in some of the original sanctuaries that were selected, I want to say about 15 or 18 years ago, some of those areas are where there is significant sedimentation taking place. So there is certainly, that is certainly an accurate statement, that some of these sanctuaries are in these areas that we may never be able to bring back oysters the way we have thought we would. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you,
And we'll be
Subcommittee.
moving to our final budget for the day. It's the Maryland School for the Deaf. Just a minute. Morales, Natalie Morales, right? Your last name? Andrade. I didn't have it in front of me. All I know is Natalie. Natalie Andrade is the budget analyst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. I am Natalie Andrade, and I'm here with the Department of Legislative Services to present the fiscal 27 allowance for the Maryland School for the Deaf. As you can see on page 1 of the analysis, the fiscal 27 allowance totals $57.8 million. This is an increase of $2.2 million, or the 3.9% compared to the fiscal 26 working appropriation. Turning to page 2 of the analysis, MSD receives a proposed fiscal 26 personal deficiency of about $1.9 million. This deficiency covers costs related to lower than expected vacancy savings. On page 3, Exhibit 1 shows how the fiscal 27 budget will be spent. Salaries and fringe benefits total $48.1 million, or about 83% of the total budget. Contractual services total $2.5 million, and mainly support facility operations, accessibility services, and administrative functions. Contractual personnel expenses total approximately $2.3 million, and the remaining funding supports supplies, equipment, utilities, and other operating expenses. On page 5, Exhibit 2, on page 4, Exhibit 2, discusses the proposed budget change. MSD's general fund allowance is formula-based and calculated using a per pupil amount and an enrollment formula established in statute. When combined with changes in other fund sources and the fiscal 26 personnel deficiency, the total budget increases by $2.2 million, bringing the fiscal 27 allowance to $57.8 million. On page 5, Exhibit 3 presents MSD's enrollment history and projections. Enrollment for formula funding uses a 4-year average to mitigate sharp increases and decreases in the student population. Total enrollment increased in fiscal 25, following a decline in fiscal 24, while enrollment for formula funding is projected to remain relatively stable in fiscal 27. So the agency should comment on factors affecting recent enrollment fluctuations, including the increase in total enrollment in fiscal 25, following a decline in fiscal 24, and whether enrollment levels are expected to remain stable in future years. Beginning on page 6 and continuing on page 7, the key observations section discusses the student outcomes. Exhibit 4 shows graduation and post-secondary outcomes for students earning high school diploma or a certificate program completion. Reported outcomes vary year to year, reflecting small cohort sizes, changes in student decision-making, and limitations in post-secondary and adult service capacity. MSD has indicated that some reported outcomes reflect timing and reporting constraints rather than the permanent placements. On pages 7 and 8, the analysis discusses the redesigned kindergarten readiness assessment, which was first used in the 25-26 school year. Statewide results for students with disabilities showed that about 1/3 of students met KRA expectations in early literacy and math, while about half were rated as beginning in those areas. MSD has not yet reported results for its own students due to timing of the data. The agency should provide the results of the redesigned KRA for its students in the 25 and 26 school year and discuss how the assessment will be used to inform instruction and support. To conclude, on page 9 of the analysis, the Department of Legislative Services recommend concurring with the governor's allowance. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for your analysis. Are there any questions for the analyst? Seeing none, thank you so much. Hold on. There it is. Okay, so we'll now be hearing from I guess it's Superintendent John Serrano.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to save the best for last today, huh? Chairperson, Delegate Stephanie Smith, and other subcommittee members. Thank you for allowing us to have the opportunity to speak today. My name again is John A. Serrano, and I serve as the superintendent at Maryland School for the Deaf. I am also the agency head at the school. Joining me today is Brian Halloran, MSD's new Chief Financial Officer, and as well as our Chief Operating Officer. I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude to Ms. Natalie Andrade and her team for their collaboration, and their efforts in preparing the legislative budget analysis. Thank you. While we've already submitted our written testimony, I'd like to take this opportunity to emphasize some key points for your consideration. In our written response, we highlighted our progress, which we have made in addressing the remaining unresolved audit findings. Many of those findings are now close to full resolution. We remain fully committed to resolving those remaining issues, including those related to the use of vendors for sign language interpreting services. To that end, we have completed the solicitation and bidding process, and we are working on presenting the solicitation and supporting documentation to the Board of Public Works. We appreciate the collaborative efforts of the Department of Budget and Management, as well as the Office of State Procurement, in navigating what has been a complex process. Secondly, we cannot overstate the importance of including the $1.9 million deficiency appropriation in this budget. This funding would restore resources that were previously reduced due to statewide budget cuts imposed last summer. These cuts, and to ensure that MSD can continue to provide a free and appropriate public education, FAPE, as mandated by law for our students. Finally, we deeply appreciate the state's ongoing commitment to supporting MSD's mission of providing academic and social opportunities that empower deaf and hard of hearing students across Maryland to truly achieve their full potential and contribute meaningfully to our communities. MSD stands apart as a unique institution by offering a fully inclusive and accessible signing environment where students can thrive both academically and linguistically. In conclusion, MSD concurs with the analysis and recommendations. Thank you for your consideration and your continued support of our mission, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Vice Chair Woolen.
Thank you so much, Chair. I had a question with regard to the Exhibit 4, specifically looking at the outcomes for your students. We've heard from USM earlier today, and we'll continue to hear from institutions of higher education in the state. I just wanted to have an understanding of what your students are doing in terms of after graduation. I know it says work, college, training. If you could speak a little bit to that, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. I'm happy to answer, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you for your question. Our students vary for those that do achieve high school diplomas, their post-secondary education varies. Some of our students go to Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C., which is the only liberal arts university in the world, specifically serving deaf and hard of hearing populations. Others, a large percentage of other students go to NTID, or Rochester Institute of Technology as well, which also has a large deaf and hard of hearing population. Some of our students go to a local community college. They enter into workforce training programs or apprenticeships. And for those students that need additional supports, do sometimes access our 18 to 21 transition program called the Orioles Career Academy, which allows them to access job coaching services as they are able to transition into living with the Department of Rehabilitative Services. You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much. There are no other members of the public signed up to speak and give testimony, so that concludes today's budget hearing for the Maryland School for the Deaf. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you.
And that concludes all of our budget hearings for today.
It's on.